So, hello friends. So, today we'll start with chapter 11 Cell Structure and Microorganism. Okay, so as the first question goes, what is the name of the minute compounds of which the body of living organism is made of? Okay, is the number of these small units the same in bodies of all organisms? The first answer is cell and the second no. Now cell. Now we have learned that cellular organization is the primary characteristic of all living organisms. Basically whatever you see is alive, be it trees, be it insects, humans, birds, they are all made of cells. And the cell is a fundamental structure and functional unit of living organisms. Basically, if you tend to divide, then at the last what will be left is cell. Cell is the only thing that can survive independently. Okay, I mean below cells, outside of cells they can survive. For example, organs may survive independently, but anything below the cell cannot survive independently. So, and everything is made up of cell, so it's a fundamental, structural and functional unit. On the flow chart, that's a very good explaining actually. Here you have alphabet, here you have paragraph. So like alphabet is a basic part of the book. For example, this word W, if you divide the book into many parts, a book has chapter have paragraphs, paragraphs have sentences, sentences have words and words have alphabets. So alphabets are the basic unit. Okay, so similarly in living organisms the hierarchy is cell, which make tissues, tissues make organ make organ system, and organ system make organism. Okay, so basically if there is no cell there are no tissues, there are no tissues there are no organs, there is no organ there is no organ system. So cells form the basis of the structure and function of living organism. Okay, so now this is the one thing which is given in diagrammatical form. Okay, cell, then many cells combine to form tissues, many tissues combine to form organs, many organs combine to form organ system, and these organ system form the organism. I mean many organ system form the organism. Now one thing that is good to know, that the first scientist to discover a cell was Robert Hooke in the year 1665, and he derived from the Latin term cella, which means small room. And the fact that the cells divide was given by these two scientists, M.G. Sheldon and Theodore Schwann. Okay, what they did is they gave one of the theories that form the basis of cell structure nowadays, that what all the living organisms are made up of cells, and all the living organisms are made up of cell, and a cell is a fundamental component of living organisms. The what we know today was proposed by Schwann. Okay, and in 1885 what Rodolphe Virchow said, that all cells are formed from pre-existing cells. Basically it's not that you can take in a lab, combine 2-3 chemicals combined and call it a cell. No, all the cells come from pre-existing cells. Now measurement of cells. Now basically the microscope was discovered in 1673 by Anton von Leeuwenhoek. Okay, he constructed a microscope by assembling a lens, and he was the first to observe live bacterial and protozoan cells. The thing is, cells are extremely minute. Okay, you cannot see them with the naked eye, and they are in micrometer or a nanometer. Okay, so basically if I complete the table, you would know that 1 centimeter equals to 100 millimeter, 1 millimeter is 1000 micrometer and 1 micrometer is 1000 nanometer. So you can see basically when we look at the scale, we can rarely see what is below the millimeter range. So since we cannot even see micrometer, seeing nanometer is next to impossible with naked eye. Okay, now what is this experiment? That take an onion, okay, peel off its outer skin. You take an onion and you peel this outer skin. Not the inner part that we eat, the outer part. Okay, and try to make it as thin as possible, because if you make a thick slide, then actually the color won't be absorbed. You will add a solution to it. So basically make it as thin as possible. Okay, thin skin, as I said, thin skin from its concave surface with the help of forceps. Place the membrane on a glass slide and pour a drop of water on it. Okay, and membrane shouldn't get folded, because if you do, now let me see, put a drop of a dilute solution of iodine or eosin over it and observe under 10x. Now why did I say it should not fold? Because if it folds or becomes thick, then the iodine solution which you are trying to put, it won't be absorbed uniformly, and you will be able to see only some part of it and not all part you want to see. Don't forget to put a cover slip over the onion skin on the slide before placing it under the microscope. Okay, so that it's not affected when you move it. Now you will see something like this. It may be not that good. Maybe the cells will have to be distorted, or some of them may have been destroyed. But yeah, it will appear something very similar to this. Okay. So in similar way, you can observe the others. Now one thing, can you tell? Are all the cells that you observed all alike? What is the structure? What is their shape? Okay, in this case you took an onion skin, but in some cases, like if you take a sample of fruit, it might be different. Okay. Now coming back to cell size. Now the thing is, the cell shape is not constant. You see, cells have to perform a function, and what function they do, that actually determines their sizes. So for example, amoeba is a single cell organism. It has to do everything by itself, so it's a bit larger. Compare it with red blood cells. The one thing they have to do is to transport the oxygen from one part to another. So compared to amoeba, these might be smaller. Similarly, in egg cell, the eggs which birds give, they are often single cells. So what happens is, it's big. As you can see the egg cell is big. In fact, what we know is that the ostrich egg is one of the largest single cell ever. Egg cell. Okay. Then the biggest nerve, the cell in human body, is the nerve cell. Okay. So now coming back to point, as they say, cells are of, I'm reading this point. Cells are of many different shapes. Example, circular. Okay, I'll give an example. Example, circular, rod-shaped, columnar. Okay, columnar, spiral, oval and rectangular. Columnar, spiral. There's no example of oval and rectangular cells. Okay. Now, a cell might be able to do everything. Now the thing is, how does it do it? So in order to help the cell, a cell inside has various kind of components. Okay. So as they say, I'm reading this line. Each cell contains various components for carrying out the life processes of living organism. These are called organelles, or as some people might call it, organelles. Though technically, since organelles have been derived from the term organ, hence they should be called organelles. Okay. So now these organelles are studied in detail with the help of electron microscope. Mind it, the normal the normal microscope that you find in the lab might not be able to see them. Not might not, it will not be able to see them. You see, with the microscope you have in college, what you observe is this onion cell. This is the maximum it can go to show you a cell. It cannot zoom in, okay, cannot zoom in and tell you what is inside this particular cell. You need an electron microscope for that. Okay. For that matter, electron microscope can see much of the things that are really minute. In nanometer sizes, we really actually use it. Okay. Sorry. We can magnify images up to 2 into 10 to the power 9 or 2 billionth time their actual size. Good for us. Okay. So basically there are many types of cells, but for this case there are two main types of cell: animal cells and plant cells. Okay. The difference shall be clear in them, as I can see it in the next diagram. Okay. Plant cells have a definite shape due to presence of a cell wall around them. Okay, I'll just explain everything. All these cells are known as eukaryotic cells. Okay, basically, okay, it will be defined later. So let's take a look at plant cell and animal cell. Okay, these are under the electron microscope. So as you see, a plant cell has this large big thing. You call it a vacuole. Okay, this takes place in the central part of the cell, and the nucleus is pushed to the corner. By contrast, to compare an animal cell, the vacuole is small and the nucleus is at the center of the cell. One thing that is the primary difference between plant and animal cell is this: the presence of cell wall. Cell wall is a characteristic which is unique to the plants and the fungus. Okay, plants have cell wall, but animals, they do not have cell walls. The outer membrane is the cell membrane, or as it's sometimes called, nuclear membrane. Both are actually used. So there are many, and plants. Now we already learned when we learning about nutrition that plants have a chemical called chloroplast. Chloroplast contains chlorophyll, due to which plants can make their own food. Animals do not have chloroplast. Okay. That is why they cannot make their own food. So every other organelle is present. We have ribosomes, lysosomes, cell membrane. Now this some people call Golgi bodies, some people called Golgi bodies. That depends. Okay. Nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, vacuoles, and mitochondrion. A single is mitochondria, multiple is mitochondrion, or maybe the other way around. Okay. Now, as we see, the cell has four main parts: the cell wall, cell membrane, cytoplasm, and cell organelles. So, what is the cell wall? Okay, let me draw a plant cell maybe. This is a cell wall. Okay, this kind of any shape, but it is fixed, and this is the plasma membrane. Okay, this is generally there's not that much difference between the two. The two are really close. Okay, what I do is let me draw a much precise figure. Okay, this is a cell wall. This is a cell membrane. Okay, so this is a more realistic structure. So this is a cell wall, which is A given here, and this is B. Okay, so what is a cell wall? So it is, okay, I think the diagram got rubbed. So cell wall is the outermost covering of a plant. Let me draw it again, not an issue. Okay, cell wall is an outermost covering of a cell. Okay, it is present only in plant cell. Okay, the second thing is plasma membrane. It is also called cell membrane, plasma membrane, both terms are used interchangeably. They are a kind of thin covering. Okay, it's extremely delicate and flexible. The flexibility is actually what helps them to grow. Okay, it is the outermost covering of animal cell. Animal cells don't have cell wall. One of the distinction that drives plant cell and animal cell is the presence of cell wall. Okay, next comes cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is, this is a cell membrane, this is cytoplasm, whatever is the liquid structure inside it. The liquid part in the cell present around the nucleus is called cytoplasm. It occupies the space between plasma membrane and nucleus. Cell organelles are scattered in cytoplasm. So cell organelles, they mainly include the nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi bodies, lysosome, mitochondria, vacuoles, plastids, etc. Plant cells, as I said, contain chloroplasts. Okay. So let's have a brief look about what is the work of these organelles. One, the nucleus is the most important organelle. Okay. There is a porous double membrane around it. Right, double membrane. So that is not a single membrane. The nucleus, this controls all the function of a cell. It instructs all the organelles what to do. Okay, the endoplasmic reticulum is a sprawling net-like organelle. Okay, what's its job? Is to make necessary changes in protein produced by ribosomes. What are ribosomes? Ribosomes are the organelles that make proteins. Then the ribosomes send these proteins to endoplasmic reticulum, and then they will make some changes if required and send them to Golgi bodies. And what will Golgi bodies do is to cover the proteins that have been made with fat. Okay. So mitochondria and plastids are organelles with double outer covering. Okay. And what is the job? Mitochondria produce energy. They are called the powerhouses of the cell. What is chloroplast? They carry out the function of photosynthesis because they have chlorophyll. And what is vacuoles? They are used to throw the waste products of the cell. So as explained in the diagram, vacuoles in animal cells are small, whereas there is only one large vacuole in plant cell. Okay, so a quick overview will be: ribosomes manufacture the protein and send it to endoplasm reticulum. Endoplasm reticulum take that proteins, modify it, and then send it to Golgi bodies. The Golgi bodies have fat sacs. They package the protein and distribute it. Mitochondria's job is to produce energy. The chloroplasts, they have chlorophyll, which helps the function of photosynthesis. Vacuoles are a sac, basically sort of dustbin of plants. Okay. Now let us come to microorganisms. So what are microorganisms? The organisms which cannot be seen with our eyes but can only be observed under a microscope are called microorganisms. Basically, micro is a scale. Basically, if I have to explain that 1 millimeter is 1000 micron. Micron is represented by this, and 1 centimeter is 100 millimeter. So basically 1 centimeter is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, sorry, that's 1 meter. 1 centimeter, actually I made a mistake. 1 centimeter is 10 millimeter. So 1 centimeter is 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4 micro. Basically very small. Micro is the stage, is a scale, and the organisms found at this scale are called microorganisms. So where do they occur? They are present everywhere. In fact, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, everywhere they are present. Okay? So this paragraph mentions that where are they present and where do they live. Okay? Now, occurrence and measurement of microorganisms. Okay, before that, let me give you an idea of a scale. Okay, as I said, we cannot see objects smaller than 100 micrometers in size, basically some millimeters, a small millimeter. So we make glass slides of microorganisms and observe them under a compound microscope. So what the microscope do is, it magnifies it, basically enlarges it, you can use the term, or basically makes it bigger 1000 times so that we can see it. Now the problem is, if it proves insufficient, then we have to use an electron microscope. Especially in viruses, this problem is really compound. Viruses are one of the smallest organisms we know. Okay, viruses are an entirely separate case which will be dealt later. But yeah, viruses are not cells, they are an organism of their own kind. Okay, what is the size? Paramecium is 100 micrometers. Bacteria of typhoid is 1 to 3 micrometers. And poliovirus is 28 nanometers. Basically, poliovirus is so small that you cannot even see it. Through a normal compound microscope, you 100% need an electron microscope. And barring the virus, their organelles carry out the life processes within a single cell. These two. Okay. So there are some experiments about how to see them. So one is, keep a moistened bread or bhakri. Then if you look under magnifying glass, you will observe some fungi. A muddy water or a pool water from a stagnant puddle, you will see a lot of organisms, similar for yogurt. Okay. Then this following photo is the nature of microorganisms, basically the sizes. Okay, I'll let you know one or two which I know. So let's come here. These three are species of fungi. Okay, it should be G. Okay, and this is Spirogyra, that is amoeba, this is paramecium, and these are under a kingdom dinoflagellates, but I don't remember their name exactly. These are the viruses whom we call bacteriophages, basically the viruses that infect the bacteria. Okay, and okay, I haven't seen them, the other of them anywhere, but it's basically an idea that there is a large variety and not everyone can know what everything is. Okay, so some microorganisms like the fungus that grow on bread or strands of algae in ponds are multicellular. So one thing to remember is, fungi may be small but they are multicellular. The strands of algae, okay, I'll be using the term algae and algae both. The correct pronunciation still depends on what the person says. Okay. However, most microorganisms such as bacteria and viruses are unicellular. And one thing is, they have a different cell structure. You know, we just learned about organelles, right? The ribosomes, Golgi bodies, endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, and bulk of a lot of things. These cells don't have them. Okay, as they say, they do not have the membrane bound organelles found in eukaryotic cells. Okay, the plasma, membrane, cytoplasm and nucleoid are the only components. Such cells are called prokaryotic cells. So basically, what is the distinction between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells? Prokaryotic cells, they do not have any membrane bound organelle, while eukaryotic cell have membrane bound organelles. So this is what separates the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. A bit of extra knowledge: the prokaryotic cells are one of the early species that came up, so they don't have the upgrades that we humans who came later have. Okay, so here is a cell structure. Now ribosomes are not membrane bound. Okay, they don't have membrane, so they are present. Cytoplasm, nuclei, plasma membrane, cell wall, this all are known. Now capsule. Some bacteria have capsule for the protection. Okay, basically one plasma membrane, one cell wall, and then one thick capsule for protection. Flagellum is present in some of them for movement. For example, it's not important that everyone has it. Amoeba doesn't have a flagellum. Okay, then there is plasmid, one of the other organelles. Now, where do microorganisms grow? Medium, soil, water, decaying matter, etc. Temperature 25 to 37 degrees. Nutrients, specific nutrients. Temperature, moist, humid, warm. Okay. Now, the next box, this is good. According to the shape and life processes, microorganisms classified as algae, fungi, protozoa, bacteria, and viruses. Okay. So basically, algae are like plants. They can produce their own food. Fungi, they produce their food from dead and decaying matter. Protozoa and bacteria, okay, there isn't much of a distinction which one can define. And viruses, as I told you, they are a separate organism cell in itself. Okay. So basically it tells where do microorganisms live. One thing that really is what, during adverse conditions, microorganisms form a thick covering around themselves and stop their life processes. This is a really good, that's why bacteria have been able to survive. Bacteria were the first organisms, especially the prokaryotic ones we know. They are the first organisms to be there on earth. By contrast, we humans have come very recently. So in a way, the bacteria have been able to survive so long because they have this condition. When adverse condition comes, they form a thick covering and protect themselves. On return of favorable conditions, they come out of the protective covering and continue their life processes. That is why it's not easy to kill bacteria. You see, they have survived for 1,000 of years and they will continue to evolve as we evolve. That is why we haven't been able to get rid of the bacteria, because whatever we do, they have been designed to evolve. Okay. Now, useful microorganism. So what you do is take 2 earthen pots. Okay, and they should be brown in color. Okay, fill them with soil. We take some brown shade for soil, and on one hand, as they say, this is A, this is B. For A, you put some garden waste, dung, fruit peel, vegetable stalks, paper scrap, etc. And in B, you put glass, scrap, plastic metals, and then observe. So, what we observe will be that in A, the microbes, as observation said, microbes present in the soil, dung, etc. decompose the garbage to obtain food material. Okay, this is one thing. That is why we can put these things in the soil. But on the contrast, like glasses or plastic, bacteria don't readily convert it. It takes them a lot of time, maybe 1,000 of years, to break it. Okay. As a result, garbage is soon converted into a manure. Garbage is soon converted into a manure of best quality, and our surroundings are kept clean. So, as in case of garbage, for proper sewage disposal too, microbes are released into the sewage. Okay, because the thing is, everywhere, as I said, bacteria are everywhere around us. So what you do is, you put it in soil, the bacteria need food. So they get tea leaves basically are what? They are plant products. Dung is what? An animal product. They are generated naturally. They are not artificial. That's why they said one should avoid the use of plastics, because plastics don't occur naturally. Hence, bacteria are not able to break them. So one should never bury plastic, or for that matter, try to avoid the use of plastic as much as possible. Okay. Now, one thing which I discussed even in the a lot of times is maybe in earlier chapters, I don't remember what chapters, I discussed about nitrogen fixation. Okay, we have seen that some microorganisms present in the soil and those in root nodules of leguminous plants convert atmospheric nitrogen to its compounds. We have seen that in the earlier chapter. I just don't happen to remember the chapter name or number. Basically, what they do is these nitrogen compounds increase soil fertility and thereby the protein content of the pulses grown in that soil. Because for vegetarians, pulses are the only source of protein. So to ensure that the proteins are proper in pulses, we need the microbes. Okay. Now the next thing is yogurt. This is still a technique used in some of the households, including mine. That what do we do to make a curd? Now this thing, if a few drops of yogurt or buttermilk are present in lukewarm milk and is kept at temperature for 8 to 10 hours, microbes present in the drops of yogurt quickly multiply and the milk is converted to yogurt. Okay. A lot of time this is used to make yogurt. The next thing which we see is fermentation. The chemical process of conversion of one type of carbon compound into another type of carbon compound by an action of microorganism is called fermentation. Now the good thing is heat generated in this process and carbon dioxide and some gases are released. So these gases cause an increase in volume. Example, bread dough and idli batter are seen to rise. Okay, this is a really good example of fermentation. What you do is often when you try, for example, I'm making bhature. So what you do is you take some curd among the other ingredients and mix it. So what happens? The microbes take the carbohydrates present in say maida, which is used in bhature, and they act and they release carbon dioxide, which helps them to make, if I use the term fluffier, I have to use the term, they are risen. So we leave them for 1 to 2 hours. Similarly, while making idli or dosa, we leave the batter for 1 to 2 hours. Let the microorganisms do their work. Okay. So as a result, I'm reading here, if microorganisms are allowed to grow in batter, dough, fruits, etc., they break down these substances, producing new compounds as they grow and multiply in them. So they become good for us. Now one thing is, okay, microbes are good for us, we know, but only some. The rest are harmful to us. Okay. So what is it? Sometimes when you're ill, the doctor prescribes capsules or injections of medicine like penicillin. Okay. These type of medicines destroy the pathogens and retard their growth. They are called antibiotics. Okay. They are used with the help of special microbes. So basically antibiotics are any of the, basically anti means against, and biotics is derived from a Greek word life, which is against life. In this case, it is against life of microbes and not against the life of humans. Okay, so they are produced by the help of special microbes. So now bacterial diseases like tuberculosis, typhoid, cholera, etc., which were now considered incurable, have now been under control because of antibiotics. Cholera is also called as Heja in Hindi. If you want that to know how dangerous it is, remember that a few generations before us, if you ask them, used to die of Hendra or cholera. Okay. Domestic animals can too be protected from various diseases by mixing antibiotics with their food. Plant diseases can also be controlled with antibiotics if the need be. Now, as the green box says, they are good for curing disease, but they can be harmful if used without consulting a physician. Remember, one should never ever have antibiotics without a doctor saying that. Over the counter, one should not rarely have them unless doctor prescribes, and they should never be overdone. Hence, a course of antibiotics should be completely, strictly following a doctor's prescription. In fact, we should not take any medicines on our own to treat ailments like body aches, headaches, common cold, etc. Okay, the one thing that I would like to say is, it's a bit of extra. If you want to listen. If you're not so. Due to people taking a lot of antibiotics, the bacteria have now become a sort of resistant to the existing ones. So scientists are still working on discovering new antibiotics. But in a nutshell, if the doctor says take an antibiotic course for say 5 days, okay, and if you start feeling well from 3rd day, then you should take these 2 days, because if you do not take for these 2 days, this can be harmful. Basically what happens is the bacteria have been inactive for within 3 days of antibiotics. The bacteria become inactive. They are not yet dead. So if you take for 2 more days, they die permanently and you feel healthy. But if you stop there, they are again, as I said, they have an unfavorable condition. They develop a capsule, and as you stop eating them, the effect wears down. And the ones that survive are actually more powerful, and this antibiotic won't work. Okay, now coming back to point. A vaccine produced in a laboratory with the help of microbes, this point I'm reading, that gives immunity against a particular disease. If we have been vaccinated against any disease, our immunity to the disease increases. Basically what happens is, what is a vaccine? It is a weak strain of a particular disease. For example, one of the famous vaccines most of you would have in your childhood is DPT. It covers basically 3 diseases. One is diphtheria, the T is for typhoid. I forgot what the P for was. I guess pneumonia, I'm not really sure. But this one was diphtheria and typhoid. So what happens is, when the vaccine is given, the bacteria that causes these diphtheria and typhoid, they are the weak strains injected into your body. So what do you do is, your body when exposed, it remembers the disease later on. Okay. So what happens, our immunity, that is the resistance to our disease, increases. If the actual diphtheria or typhoid bacteria come, our body remembers, oh yes, I have seen it before, and it immediately destroys it. Okay. Microbes are also used like tanning of skin, leather, production of ropes and strings from a grave. Okay. Some microbes use oil for their growth. If 2 ships clash and some oil is there, then these can be used for cleaning it. Okay. Now come harmful microorganisms. Okay. Now we have learned about the food quality. One of the thing is food poisoning, an extreme case of food going bad. What happened is, as they use foodstuffs for their own nutrition, some microbes release toxic materials, which the technical term is enterotoxins, into the food. Okay, such toxins spoil the food. Eating such spoiled food can cause loose motions and vomiting. Okay, food poisoning is a really bad disorder that comes up. Okay, so if you think that a particular sweet or a particular vegetable is is beyond expiry date, or it looks like it has been, what do I use the term? Okay, let me think. If that you think that has expired or that's quite old, there are chances that has been infested by the microorganisms, and eating them might cause food poisoning. This is a especially common occurrence in weddings and all. What happens often in weddings is that the food is quite old. So what they do is, sometimes when they serve the stale food creates health issues to a lot of people. Okay, now coming back to this point. If jars of pickles, murabba, etc. are opened after a long time, a round layer of white scum or black particle may appear to have been formed. Okay, this white scum is a byproduct of the bacteria, and you should immediately throw that pack away in such a way that it cannot be consumed by other. Okay, in summer milk and meat get spoiled quickly. That is why we should, whenever the summer comes, we should store the milk as much as possible in the fridge. Fungus grows quickly on moist and stale food. Okay. Now one thing is, always remember, eat fresh and properly covered food. If you go to that local halwai, I can't remember the proper term for halwai in English. So if you go to a proper halwai and you see his food is not covered, don't consume it. Do drink boiled water. Purified water also do, but yeah, boiled water is even better. Hold a handkerchief over your mouth and nose when you cough or sneeze, so that you don't spread that bacteria to others. It's maybe viruses more than bacteria though. Don't allow garbage and water to accumulate around your house, because the thing is, the mosquitoes that cause dengue and malaria, they grow in clean and clear water. So you should not allow garbage and water to accumulate around your house. Okay. So what pathogens? Pathogens may be present in water bodies. Okay. Contaminated with sewage and dirt from the surroundings, in the food left uncovered, in unhygienic condition, with housefly sitting on it, etc. Basically, any other food which has had a contact with any other organism. Okay. If such contaminated food or water is consumed, we may fall ill with amoebiasis. One species of amoeba causes amoebiasis, typhoid, cholera, hepatitis, gastro, etc. Okay. Pathogens are released into the air when a person having an infection, the respiratory tract, cough or sneezes. If you have a common cough and cold, then a single sneeze infects a few people within the range. A healthy person may get infected with such pathogens on breathing in the same air and contact diseases like what? Common cold, cough, diphtheria, pneumonia, tuberculosis, etc. So as I said about the next, mosquitoes. Mosquitoes reproduce in places with a heap of garbage, drains, stagnant water, etc. Microbes that cause disease like malaria, dengue, elephantiasis, yellow fever, chikungunya, Zika fever, etc. Yellow fever is endemic to Africa. So basically, whenever trying to visit Africa, the first thing they do is give a yellow fever vaccine. Okay, gain entry into the human body through the bite of a female mosquito. So basically, we should try that mosquitoes are not able to reproduce, not because of our fault. Okay, so ensure that any waterborne mosquitoes do not have. These are the steps that should be ensured. Okay, now do you know, this is actually good and big, that when actually we have fever, the microorganisms that infect us are designed to tolerate normal human body temperature, 37 degrees Celsius. So what we do is, as soon as the microbes enter, the human body recognizes that it is a foreign object. So what it does is, it increases the temperature so that conditions are no longer hospitable for such microbes. What they do is, this destroys the microorganisms. Okay, that is why they say one shouldn't bother after having a day or two of fever. Okay, so these are the questions that you can see yourself. These are really an issue. Okay, thank you.